Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. For those of you who may not know me, I don't know if there's anybody around who is new to this, but my name is Judy Mayfield, and I am the president of Arqrv, and I'm really happy to welcome you, delighted to welcome you to the second webinar in the series that we are running. And Ray Jordan will be conducting the meeting today. And Ray is also a member of our committee, but Ray is the person who does most of the work with the residence committees and our support desk. And if your committee is not a member yet of our support desk, I suggest that you look at signing up to the support desk. It is a separate to individual membership of Arqrv, and it is purely for the committee. The cost is an annual cost, and it depends on how many people, how many units there are actually in your village. So for the smallest village, it is $30 a year, and for the largest village, it's $100 a year. And you can talk to Laurie, who will give you all that information. Now, what the support desk does is gives you some extra of these sorts of Zoom meetings. So if you're a member of the support desk, we meet quarterly with a Zoom meeting, but always at that Zoom meeting, we have members of officers from the Department of Housing. I'm sure you all know, but the Department of Housing is the body that legislates retirement villages. And so they're the people who write the Retirement Villages Act, and they are the people who investigate any breaches of operators not following the Act. So they join us every quarter, and we also have a solicitor who comes on board, and although the solicitor can't give, obviously, legal advice per se, they will always give you a legal overview. So we answer all the questions that residence committees may have about their role and function as a residence committee. It is not about individuals bringing their, the fact that there's a dripping tap in Mrs. Brown's unit. That's not the idea of the support desk. The support desk is purely to deal with role and function and issues that residence committees may have. And it was because of some of the issues that were coming up regularly in people who were contacting Ray that we decided to put on these webinars to address the issues that we are most often contacted about. And we're happy you would see, we've done 4 of them. We've planned for 4 of them. But if there's any sort of burning issue in your residence committee that you would like to us to run a webinar on, please get in contact with the office, membership at Arqrv, and we can always run additional webinars. So again, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. And I'll hand it over to Ray. If you do want to ask questions, either at the bottom of your screen, there's a reactions tab, or somewhere on your screen, there's a reactions tab, and you can actually raise your hand like this on your screen. You'll see on my screen, I've raised my hand. If you don't know where that is on your screen, please just sit and wave your hand so that we can identify that you have a question. Don't just chime in, because we've got quite a number. I think, Laurie, at last count, we had something like 90 people coming. Was that right?
Yeah, at the moment there's 49 devices all online, so
okay.
It makes it rather large.
So 50. So there's a few people there online. So, we can't have everybody just talking. So either raise your hand, or no, I'm trying to put mine down, or wave at us. So I'll hand over to Ray, and while I'm doing that, I'll try to find out how to take my hand away. Okay, thanks, Ray.
Thanks, Judy. I suppose everyone can hear me, except can Cheryl Mallory hear us? Cheryl Mallory, can you now hear us? Give me a nod. Oh, good, thank you. I see there's a message there that you said you couldn't hear us. Just going on from what Judy said, in relation to the Residents Committee Support Desk, if you're a subscriber, to put it simply, what we help you with is the topics that are in the Residents Committee manual. All those topics that are in there, anything that's in the manual, we'll help you with, not those things that are outside the manual. That's just to clarify it. Okay, so welcome to our second webinar. Today's 3 topics are functions of Residents Committee, the Residents Committee meetings, and minutes of meetings. You might be surprised to learn some things today. I'm not sure if you've read anything in the manual. The more I move around, the more I hear people never open the manual. But I really, what's the word? Commend you to read the manual to get some ideas of what you're meant to be doing. So as Judy said, ask questions by raising your hand or give us a wave. Preferably raise your hand. Today, don't send any messages. Last time we had the webinar, the messages didn't work all that well. I wasn't able to monitor them that easily. So preferably raise your hand. Okay. Today, if I'm talking about the manager or the scheme operator or the operator, they're interchangeable just for today's talk. If I mention the word manager, it could mean the operator, or if I say operator, it could mean the manager. But it's really just management of the village, if that makes sense. Okay, the first topic, functions of the Residents Committee. The very first thing that people on a Residents Committee should understand is a Residents Committee should, I'll emphasize that word should operate differently to any other type of committee you've been on before. I'm sure there's many of you have been on committees and you've done certain works or operate in a certain way. Well, Residents Committees aren't quite the same as these other bodies. For example, if you're on the committee for a sporting group or a community group, you know, those sort of things. So if you've been on those groups before, yes, some things are the same, but there's many things that are different. So if you've been on one of those committees before, please take off that hat you wore in the past at those other committees. Okay. Now, just to get the ball rolling, the term of a member of a committee. The legislation provides that you can't be on a committee for longer than 1 year. That's your term. So committees and residents should be conscious of when they have their meeting to elect their committee. But at the end of the day, if push comes to shove by the and you go over the 12 months, you're not really a committee anymore because everyone's term has ended by the legislation. But most residents and operators really just ignore that, but just be aware of that. So if you're having any argy-bargy with your scheme operator and it's been over 12 months since the committee's been elected, at the end of the day, they can really say you're no longer a committee. So just be aware of that. Speaking of the term of membership on a committee, it's best, but it's not enforced, to have a limit on the number of years that a person can hold a particular position. There's no limit on how many years they can be on the committee, but it's wise or prudent to have in the constitution of the residents' constitution to have a limit on how long a person could be. Say, for example, particularly the chair and particularly the treasurer. Not so much the secretary, but the chair and treasurer. I'm not sure if I need to explain why, but does anybody want me to explain why that's a good idea to have those things limited? Does anybody give me a nod? No, you're all happy with that? I see Bevan said yes. Well, for example,
excuse me, Ray, there is Robin Gray. Did you have a question? You were waving your arm, or was that a yes?
There's a green.
Gray, sorry.
No, it was just a yes.
Okay, yep. Okay, so I'll explain that quickly. It's a good idea to limit the term of the chairperson because if they're there too long, they just become, what's the word? They put on the ruler's hat and think they're the king or queen of the village. So it's best if you rotate them through more often. I know in our village, I think our village says 3 years maximum for a chairperson. So that's the reason why a chairperson should be rotated through. They can still be on the committee by all means, or the chair or the secretary or another executive position, but they just shouldn't be the chair. The other position that's important is the treasurer. If a person's looking after the purse strings for year after year after year, they get a bit blasé with their procedures or the security of the money. So it's best if they get rotated through too. I know we're all honest and everything, but money does go missing. To get my drift, they tend to borrow it. Now, the specific function of a residence committee. It's provided by the legislation, and I'll read it out to you. Okay, the function of the residence committee. It's section 129 of the Retirement Villages Act. It says the function of the residence committee is to deal with the scheme operator on behalf of residents about the day-to-day running of the village and any complaints or proposals raised by residents. That is the word for word what the legislation provides is your proper function. Now, those words in our Act, the Retirement Villages Act, is completely different to the words or the functions of other committees in other bodies. The committee of other bodies are giving a controlling role and a representative role. We're going to go through the words in that provision in a minute, but there's no controlling role and there's no representative role in those words. For example, the use of certain words in and terms in that, to deal with. The words are used to deal with. To deal with means to work with the operator to a result of some description, means to deal with, okay? It doesn't always mean that the residence committee has to resolve it themselves. The result might be as simply as just passing on a complaint or a proposal from residents to the manager, and that would be to deal with it. Yes, you might deal with it down the track again too, but it doesn't mean that the ultimate responsibility rests with the committee. A lot of residents have this view of committees thinking that they give them a problem and they can resolve it. Committees can't usually resolve the problem. They have to deal with the manager to resolve the problem. Is that a fair comment? Yeah, give me a few nods. That's a fair comment. But at least they dealt with it. And another thing, to deal with also means when they pass it on to the manager, the answer still might be no from the manager, but it's still been dealt with. Does that make sense? You happy with that? Everyone's very quiet today. Don't be afraid to give me a nod.
Ray, I'll make a comment about that. A lot of residence committees sort of think they have to be responsible for everything in the village and everybody's happiness in the village.
Exactly.
That's why they do that. It's not your role. It is not the role of the residence committee to do that. Okay, you just, as Ray said, you deal with the manager. So can I say something about managers? You have to learn to work with them. The number of people who phone me up and say, oh, no, we don't talk to the manager. Well, you know what? That's part of your role. You have to find ways of working collaboratively with the manager. It is no good thinking you can solve things on your own, because you can't do it without the manager and the scheme operator. As Ray says, you don't have the authority to go in and deal with, sort out a lot of these issues. So I'm really very much in favour of dealing with the village manager so that these matters can be resolved. A good village works with the residence committee and the village manager working collaboratively. Then you'll have a good village. If you've got problems between the village manager and the residence committee, you will never get the village to operate well.
Just reinforcing what Judy said, she said part of your role is to deal with the manager. I'd like to say it's your whole role to deal with the manager, basically. By law, that's what you're meant to do. Now, speaking of the words and terms that are in that section of the Act, the lack of the word represent. They don't use the word, you don't represent residents. That means you don't.
Margaret Cranston, were you raising your hand? Oh, okay.
Okay, no, you're just scratching. You're scratching. Okay, so the lack of the word represent means you don't actually act for residents, nor do you have any decision-making power to make important decisions unless that power is given to you by residents at a residents meeting or by the residents' constitution. So in other words, well, that's what I don't want to say in other words. You don't have any decision-making power and you don't represent them. You don't act for them. You don't speak for them. You've got it. There's a difference. There's a slight difference. Dealing with the manager to get things done, but you don't represent them, okay? You only do what the residents want. Also, the lack of the word control. The word control doesn't appear in there. That means you don't have any control or authority over residents. Unlike other committees and other bodies. You might have had that experience in other bodies. You don't have this in this body. And that one of these things that I'm speaking about now are the biggest problems that we're seeing in villages where committees get into, or members get onto the committee and they attempt to control and take authority over residents. And it just doesn't go very well. The other thing that the legislation says, the use of the term day-to-day running of the village means that's what you're meant to do, the day-to-day running of the village. For example, if there's a transition plan to redevelop not a transition plan, a redevelopment plan for the village going to get redeveloped, that's not a day-to-day operation or running of the village. That's a major issue. So you don't really deal with the operator or the manager about those sort of things unless the residents have given you authority to do so. For example, as the committee, you don't start making decisions for residents about the redevelopment. The other thing it means you're meant to work on day-to-day running the village means you shouldn't get involved between contractual matters of residents or in any issues between residents. Say if you've got Ray Jordan and Judy Mayfield having a ding-dong argument as neighbours. Hey, Judy. So we're neighbours and we're harassing and intimidating each other over the fence and all sorts of nasty things. The committee shouldn't get involved in that. If one of the residents takes that to the committee should immediately direct that to the manager for their attention. And obviously advise the resident that they're not going to be looking after it. They don't get involved. They're not a mediator because guess what? No matter which side you take, you're going to be on the wrong side. Another thing that's interesting too about residents committees, that the members of the committee don't have any special power more than any other resident. Again, we see time and time again, people get into the position of chairperson and next minute they think they're the ruler of the village. The chairperson or any other single member on the committee has no special authority or power than anybody else in the village. Hang on, here's Bevan. Bevan's got a question. Unmute yourself, Bevan.
Bevan, you'll need...
Oh, yes, got it unmuted. The unmute part had disappeared until you put something else down there. Yeah, before you said unless directed by the committee, by the residents,
yeah.
I presume that means over every item, not that the residents can't, the residents meeting can't say one day, oh, we're going to have the chairman decide on the colour of everybody's front room. I mean, you can't have general statements. I thought you would be meaning that over a particular issue on that day, the day-to-day running, on that particular issue, if the 300 people vote and say, yes, we do want this by a majority of 75%, well, then the committee or the chairman might have authority to act. Is that what you meant?
For example, there's something happening in the village of some description. I don't know. I can't even think of anything off the top of my head, but there's something happening in the village. The residents may decide to appoint their committee to do certain things for them in that regard, for that, that single purpose. It's unlikely, but it's, well, for example, forget about the residents committee for a moment, but in our village, we formed working parties a couple of years ago, various working parties for a gym, a theatre, and a craft room. And we had working parties that were appointed by the residents to make decisions for the residents about what they got in each room. So a committee could do that too. They could appoint a committee to say, you decide what you're going to get in the theatre. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Yes.
Any other questions? Okay. It's the main thing is about the attitudes of people, the day-to-day attitudes of people when they're on the committee to other residents. Not that I'm throwing any aspersions at anybody here today, but we see it. Well, I'm the one that sees it all the time because all the complaints come to me. But you'll be hearing about people that say, "Oh, the chairperson was telling people to do this and do that at a function or something, or behaviour or something." They're not the police, or they're not meant there for that reason. The role of the chairperson really is just to chair meetings, whether it's the committee meetings or residents meetings, and to make sure that the committee is actually operating effectively. After that, the chair shouldn't have much of a role in a committee. Did you want to add anything to that, Judy? You're muted. You're muted.
No, I've forgotten what I just wanted to say.
Yeah, good on you.
I'm having a seniors moment. I just wanted to say that people get confused with what the chairperson is actually, the role of the chairperson, as Ray has said. Chairpersons often think they also tell the committee what to do. No, they're actually just chairing the meeting for the committee as well. So I've known of chairpersons who thump the table at committee meetings and say, no, this is going to be our stand on the way things are. The chair can't do that either in a committee meeting. So not only do they have no power over the residents, they don't have any real power. I mean, they can you can argue for, a point of view, and the committee comes up to something, but you can't demand that the committee actually do it your way.
Okay. Now that I've probably upset...
Christine, sorry, Ray.
Yep.
The screen with Christine. Did you have a question? Got your hand up, gentleman in a bluish coloured shirt. Oh, yeah, that one. Yep.
I've got a bit of...
Oops, we've got a lot of feedback. Have you got more than one device open?
Yes.
Okay, you'll need to shut the second device. It's feeding.
Shut the second device.
If you like to, you could type your question into the message chat box and I'll pass it on.
That's okay.
Okay.
Well, we'll get back to that. Now that we've upset everybody about how bad everyone's attitude is, but I'm not talking about you people here. I'm just talking generally, just so you're aware of it. And the other thing too is not only for your benefit. I mean, not what I'm saying is for your benefit, but if the residents understand what you're meant to do too is another thing. They often have the wrong idea because one day they might be on the committee and then they'll put the wrong hat on and do the wrong thing. Okay, now that I've spoken about that, let's talk about something.
Can I just say one other thing on that, Ray? The other thing, as you were saying, it's not just for it's for your benefit as well. When you come off the committee, you don't want the new committee telling you what to do. So, set the example for how the committee needs to function, because then that will be ingrained in the village that that's how the committee functions. Because if you function in a particular way, it's going to come back to bite you when you're old and grey. The new committee will not be acting as you want them to act. So just be aware of that as you go forward.
Mike G, did you have a question? You've just unmuted yourself. Did you have a question at all?
Oh, God. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
No.
No? Okay. No problem.
Okay,
Sorry,
we'll
Ray.
go into the next. We'll go into the next subject. One thing about committees, the Retirement Village Act prescribes that residents' committees can decide their own procedures, but they can only decide their own procedures subject to what's in the residents' constitution. And ARQRV is a big believer in having a very robust residents' constitution and have as many things in your constitution that basically directs or puts a framework in place for their committee how to operate. And anything that's outside that framework that's in the Constitution, obviously the committee can then decide those procedures themselves. For example, in a resident's constitution, the residents might say in their constitution that the residents committee must meet at least once every 2 months. And leave it at that. The committee then can decide what day of the week, what time, and all the rest of it, and which months they're going to meet. So, yes, they can decide their own procedures, but it's subject to what's in their residents' constitution, and that's in the law. The Retirement Village Act also prescribes that committees can form subcommittees and also decide the subcommittees' procedures, but again, subject to what's in the residents' constitution. You'll probably find in a lot of villages that there might be social groups that will form before a residents' committee and they refuse to be a subcommittee of the residents' committee. Would that be a fair comment in some villages? You have groups that are, no sign of that? Okay. Another thing that's very important is the residents' committee must, by law, conform with what's in the residents' constitution. Again, that's actually in the Retirement Villages Act. It doesn't mention residents having to conform with the constitution, but it says that the committee must conform with the constitution. On another subject, when things are directed to the committee, they have no authority to pick and choose what they're going to deal with. For example, if Joe Bloggs puts forward a proposal, they can't say, no, we're not going to do that. If the proposal's put forward, their action or their how to deal with it, they should put it forward to the manager and let them decide no one way or the other. In other words, they shouldn't have a position on a particular thing. Another thing, if a person puts forward a proposal to the committee and the committee knocks it on the head inappropriately, that person can still raise it at a residents' meeting to be addressed at a residents' meeting, and residents can decide and overrule the residents' committee by their decision. Happens a fair bit. It even happened at our village. Just as an example, someone put forward a proposal to the residents' committee in our village to buy some weights for the pool. They were floaty weights. Didn't make any sense to me, but they were floaty weights. And the committee said, no, we're not going to buy them because our committee in our village has a pre-approved limit to spending each month, and it was within that limit. So they said, no, we don't want to buy that. So that person took that proposal to the residents and got it approved by residents, and they bought the weights for the pool. Easily done. But just getting back to that, if a proposal or a complaint's provided to the residents' committee, they've got to actually deal with it and give it to the manager or whatever they should do with it to some degree. And as I said earlier, that might be as simple as just giving it to the manager and they've dealt with it, and then let the person know what they did with it, and then the manager decides one way or the other. As I sort of mentioned before, no matter what's put forward to the residents' committee, residents should always be kept informed of outcomes and progress of matters, working either through the committee or through the manager or whatever's happening. They've got to be just kept informed in some manner. We'll talk about that when we talk about the minutes of meetings in a minute. Another important thing, and Judy said this before, I'll just reinforce it. In relation to more major things of the village, the committee should not take a position or have a policy on a matter. It's not for them to do that, as opposed to other committees in other groups. The committee should actually support whatever position the residents decide on at a residents' meeting. End of story. That is the position of residents, and that is the position that the residents' committee should support without failure. No matter how silly it is, that's what they should do. So, put simply, at the end of the day, a committee is a conduit between residents and management and a facilitator of the resolutions of residents at a residents' meeting. It's as simple as that. In that one sentence, that's what a residents' committee should be doing. In some villages, they might be doing social stuff. That's another matter altogether, but they might be doing social stuff. So they're really a conduit to the manager between residents, and they're also a facilitator of residents' decisions. One very important thing, and this leads us on to the next topic, committee members, including the chairperson, should not have private discussions with management or the manager. The business of a residents' committee should always only take place at a convened meeting of the committee. So you'll often see the chairperson having a head-to-head with the manager. It's not really a good look. Doesn't pass the pub test. Hey, Judy.
No.
No. What are they plotting? What are they doing? Because a committee is a committee. In other words, you're a group of people to start with. You're not a sole operator. So you've got to operate as a committee. And the other thing is, business only takes place at a meeting, not when you're having a discussion in the office. Because what happens at a committee meeting, you've got to take minutes of the meeting. Hang on, Frederick Dixon's got a question. Unmute yourself, Fred. You going to ask a question, Fred? Oh, here we go.
No, he's
if for instance, the chairperson is called in by the village manager, what can they do about that? Refuse to go?
No, you've got to let the manager know that committee business takes place at a committee meeting. I mean, yeah, you can go, but you can't conduct business there. Why on earth should the manager call the chairperson in? For what purpose? I mean,
well,
you don't have any special power or authority to do anything. I mean, they should talk to the whole committee.
What
yeah,
you
that's
could,
all right, but when you've got a cyclone bearing down on you,
Well, that's a different. No,
that's not the day-to-day matters of the village.
well, yes, it is if you have day-to-day cyclones.
I think that if
But
you
the other thing I'm interested in, while I've got you, you're talking about the treasurer, which I am of this committee. Where does the committee get any funds from?
It's not the committee's money; it's the residents' money. If there's any money raised in the village,
money, but how does the committee get any money?
the committee doesn't get it. The residents get it.
But the way they get it is it's usually got from a number of sources. Depends on the structure of your village and how it's done. So the social club, the money that the social club raises for the activities, the raffles, etc., things that it does, the money that the bar might raise for activities and selling of drinks, all of that money should be stored in a central fund. Now, I know in some villages that the social clubs will keep their own money. The money is not the money of the social club. Any money raised within the village is residents' money. So in a good practices, in villages where you've got some really solid practices, all the money that's raised by the various clubs and activities in the village goes to a central bank account called the Residents of blah blah village bank account. And the money is all put in that bank account, but it is handled and managed by the treasurer of the residents committee. Now, if the social club wants money for a big function, they have to go. I mean, I'm not talking about buying a book of raffle tickets, but if the social club are going to put on a Christmas party, and that money, and they want to subsidise residents going to that Christmas party, what they have to do is they have to go to a residents' meeting, because it's residents' fund, it's not residents' committee fund. So they go to a residents' meeting, and they say, we would like permission to spend $1,000 that has been raised over the year on a Christmas party, subsidised Christmas party. And then all the residents vote to say, yes, we agree with that. And then at the end of the day, when the Christmas party's been done, they receipts are given so that everybody knows, you know, how the money was spent. The treasurer keeps those receipts and balances the books and gives the balance of the books to the residents to have a look at. So at a residents' meeting, not only should you give the minutes of the meeting, but you should also give the monthly bank statements and accounts to residents to have a look at. Now, if Mike G, but at the end of the day, if you've got money raised in the village, it is always residents' meeting. Now, I've heard of social clubs running social activities, and at the end of the year, all the social committee take themselves out for lunch. That is not on. That is not on. That's residents' money. That money that you've raised and is done by residents belongs to residents.
This topic.
In a large, I've got a dispute there. In a large village, you know, we've got 400 houses here and that. We'd never get anything done, and you'd never get anybody to be treasurer having that sort of workload, because then they're responsible to the social committee, the bowls committee, the scratch me back committee, everything else.
We've got to get back on track, Judy.
Okay, sorry, I took it off to finances. Ray's doing minutes at the moment. We'll come back to the finances in a moment.
Okay.
Well, you can talk about that later. It's not even on today's agenda.
Yeah.
Ian College has a quick question, Ray.
Is it relevant to the webinar?
I haven't taken him off mute, so I don't know. I'm sorry.
Who is it?
You want me to?
Ian College.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I'm the president of the Caloundra Rise Residents Association, and we do what Ray's been talking about. We have a pretty good working relationship with the manager. Would you say we got no rights? By having a good working relationship, the manager might say, what do you think about this? Well, by giving an opinion, you're giving an opinion on behalf of the president, not just the whole committee. That's a sort of a delicate thing, but by having a good relationship, it does work. But
never said you didn't.
You get more power than Ray has said you really have, because you might be able to give an opinion, but I always take it back to the committee to have that checked. And
Ian,
the other thing is,
I'm not sure the topics you're talking about to when the manager asks you for an opinion, depending on what the nature of the question is, it really should be the view of residents, not the view of the committee. Why should you decide on a particular view and tell the manager about it, when what about the other 99% of residents don't have the same view? Anyway, let's move on about that.
Is it trivial?
At the end of the day, having a good relationship is a good thing, though. Okay, so we talked about the business of
the minutes we're talking about.
We're only talking about the business of committee taking place at a meeting. And then the reason why you only have business at a meeting is because the minute must be minuted, which is the next topic. So as I said, you take minutes at a meeting, okay? Hang on. No, we're not talking about the minutes, we're talking about the meeting itself. I stand corrected. We're not talking about the minutes, we're talking about the meeting. I'm thinking of my notes. This doesn't make sense. Okay, now going back to what I said, it leads on us to the fact that the business only takes place at a meeting. So because the function of the hang on, now we've got Bevan.
Hang on, Bevan. Bevan, do you have a question? You'll have to unmute, Bevan.
Yeah, the conclusion from that, Ray, is that if you took into account just what you're saying, if the manager goes to the treasurer or the secretary or the chairperson to ask a question, that really he should give it. It's the same as going to anybody in the whole village. It's a personal opinion on whether the pothole should be filled that's been there for 6 months or not. That's nothing more than the opinion of a particular person he's chosen to talk to, and he can choose to talk to anybody he wants to, can't he, the manager? And
Yeah,
that person can only give his own personal opinion if he hasn't taken it to a meeting.
Yes.
Everybody has their own opinion.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
And even at a committee meeting, everyone has their own opinion. Yeah. They can talk to him, but they don't talk to him as a committee.
Can I just say, though, one way of overcoming some of that would be then for the chairperson to raise it at the next committee meeting and for the committee to minute it. And Ray's going to talk about minutes in a moment, but if it's in the minutes, it goes to all residents. So that's just a way of making sure that everybody is kept informed about anything that's been discussed.
Okay, we're getting back to the fact that we're having a meeting of the residents committee. So because the function of the residents committee is to deal with the manager or the scheme operator, whatever you want to call them, this means there should be a standing invitation to the manager to every committee meeting. They should be a permanent agenda item on the residents committee meeting agenda, and they can attend and give a report for that part of the meeting, and they can leave the meeting after they've given that, or by law they're entitled, well, not so much entitled, but the committee may ask them to stay on for other things, or they leave at the request of the committee. It's not at the request of the chair, it's actually decided by the committee. And if you don't have a standing invitation for the manager to attend the meeting, there's something seriously wrong in your village to do with the committee, because that's what you're there for in the first place. It'd be ideal for the manager, when they're at the committee meeting, to provide a written report. If they don't, and that way the written report would be equivalent of being tabled at the meeting, and then it become part of the minutes, and you don't have to record the oral presentation of the manager to put into the minutes. It's a lot easier if there's a written report, but at the end of the day, the committee can only just kindly ask for a written report, but if they don't, they'll have to just take the minutes themselves from what was reported orally. Another thing that's interesting, that I've spoken to villagers, and the committee meeting is basically controlled by the manager. It's not controlled by the committee itself, not controlled by the chair. In other words, what happens is the manager basically summons the committee on a certain date and says, this is going to be the meeting. It doesn't work like that at all. The committee has a meeting and they invite the manager to their meeting and they're a guest. Does that make sense? From time to time, the committee may be asked by the manager to attend a meeting, but that's not the same. If you're having your your monthly meeting, the manager turns up as a guest. They're your guest, not the other way around.
Can I just say something there about that? It's a good idea, so that if you've had a lot of questions from residents or complaints or issues brought up by residents, that's the time you meet it. You can give the manager questions on notice, but all those questions and the way things are dealt with are talked about at the committee meeting, put in the minutes, and the minutes that get distributed to residents, so residents can see that you're addressing their issues. If the manager has issues that they want to raise with all residents, it's at that committee meeting that they actually table those issues or address those issues or talk about it, and then it goes in the minutes, and the minutes goes to all residents. So it's your minutes with and the meetings with the manager that always go into the minutes, and then that's where your communication between manager, residents committee, and residents happens.
Okay. We can even talk at length about that next. That's our next topic. So what's got to do in relation to the manager? You got to have a relationship so you can ask them properly and get them to put it in their diary. So it's not like you don't spring it on them a couple of days before the meeting. Have it as a standing invitation so they know it's going to be on like every second Tuesday of the month or something. And at 10 o'clock, end of story. They know when it's going to be on so they can work around it. Another good idea for residents committee is to have an open invitation to residents to say up to 2 residents at a meeting can come to a meeting and sit in on a meeting for 2 reasons. 1, to maintain transparency of what's going on, and 2 is to spread the love around so people might see what goes on and they might be interested in being on the committee later on. So have a standing invitation to some residents to come to the committee meeting. No big deal. Mordy, got a question?
Yep. You need to unmute, Mordy.
Unmuted. Right, number one, this webinar is very valuable, and I certainly appreciate the information being provided, so well done. We have in our village a problem of getting our manager to actually attend our committee meetings. At the beginning of a committee year, we have our meetings pre-scheduled. We distribute the meeting agenda itinerary to the residents and to the manager and confirm them.
Hang on, say that last bit again.
We pre-plan a schedule for when the committee comes into hand. Just sorry, my phone's just decided to me. When we committed, I'm the secretary from Living Choice. I pre-schedule for the year in advance the meeting times, and we get the committee to agree and the manager to agree that these are the scheduled meetings for the year, so we can all diarise this. We then put that schedule of meetings out on the notice board so residents are also aware of when we're having our meetings. Our committee minutes are put out once they're confirmed out in the library area for the residents to access at all times. So we are transparent in what we're doing, but we're having trouble getting our village manager to actually front up to a meeting. She hasn't attended a scheduled meeting since November. Her next one, because she's missing a few, won't be until May. We've approached her about this, and her request is, 1, she's too busy, and 2, she would prefer to talk to one-on-one with an open door policy, which is totally, you've highlighted that a manager shouldn't really do that because it's going to be personal. If we're trying to address this and meet with her to get a schedule that works for both sides, where the committee can meet with her as an entirety, I don't think she's overly enthused, even though we've been nice and everything we do is in a transparent manner because we make sure it goes out to the residents. What part of the Act or how would you recommend that we can get this back on board? Get her back on board. It's quite valuable. It's quite disturbing, actually. But anyway, we have.
She's in the wrong job.
Eh?
She's in the wrong job.
She's the best we've had for a while.
She should be working somewhere else.
Well, she's the best we've had for a while in our village. So
I find it hard to believe.
Can I ask you which Living Choice you're in?
Twin Waters, Judy. We're trying very hard to get a cooperative interaction.
Working relationship. Look,
I got a technique.
Yeah,
Write to a manager, write to her manager, and tell them.
no difference.
What's
There's a bit of
wrong with that place?
no, the other thing you can do, Maudie, I'm trying to problem solve, Ray. The other thing you could do, Maudie, is make sure that in your minutes it is noted that the manager was invited but was unable to attend.
No, not unable, didn't want to go.
So that
There's a difference.
so the residents can see that you are actually fulfilling your end of the role, and the manager is not doing that, and just note it in the minutes. That's all. If you're trying to work with them and they're not, just keep doing the working with, and you know, but note it so residents can see you're doing your bit.
Yeah, look, we are doing that because, and I think because I've got a business background, and so our minutes and things are done. But what Ray has said, that a business can only take place at a meeting, at a meeting, and a manager cannot ask a committee their opinion on the subject. That was quite rife here, and we're trying now to change the culture, and we're trying to change the culture of some of the long-term residents who've always gone down that track, and bring it back to we are a team and we're working as a team. We work together. You don't move on your own. It's been an exercise. But so if we go back and say, look, we've had this Arqrv webinar, and number one, can I share this webinar with the manager when we get our copy?
Not secret.
Can I share it with the residents when we get a copy?
Yeah.
No?
Yeah.
Maybe not. Okay, I'll share it with the manager.
Yeah. We're sharing it, aren't we, Judy?
Yeah, we're sharing it. If residents want to see it, that's fine. I don't know that residents necessarily will sit through an hour of, you know.
We're over an hour, going to be over an hour. I haven't even got to the third topic yet.
Yeah.
No, it's just so valuable. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No. Feel free to share with anyone you want to.
Yeah, it's just getting guidance so that we can live in Happysville.
Morty, just clarifying, Morty, there's nothing to stop individual residents from meeting with the manager.
Yeah, true.
They don't meet in a committee as a committee
individually
capacity. They don't meet as a committee capacity.
Yeah.
So if I was on the committee, I could go and talk to the manager anytime I damn well pleased as a resident.
Yeah.
As a committee member, not the committee. Okay, let's keep going.
Yeah, thank you. I'll lower my hand.
Interesting enough, at a committee meeting, the voting that's done by the committee members, when they do vote, they don't vote for anything important, but they may vote. They all have one vote, even if they live in the same unit, doesn't matter. They all have one vote because the voting that they're doing there is different to voting at a residents' meeting. Does that make sense? It's not the same voting entitlement. You're just voting as committee members as a committee. So you might be voting about to spend $100 on something or other and you vote for it. You all get a vote. And the chairperson never gets they shouldn't have a deciding vote. Everyone just gets one vote. So any decision making that's made at a residents' committee meeting is really of a minor importance. They shouldn't be making anything, what do you call it? Yeah, minor importance, unless the residents have authorised the committee to make that decision. One thing that's very important, no business at the committee meeting is secret or confidential, none whatsoever. You do not ever have confidential or secret business. If you're doing, you're in the wrong business. Everything that happens at a committee meeting should be shared with residents. And the other thing that's important, I know that I sat through committee meetings with one of our previous managers, and she used to say, I'm going to tell you this secret, but don't put it in the minutes. How dare she? She actually put people that were on the committee in an awkward position that they had extra information that other residents didn't. No way in the world should a manager say to the committee, don't put this in the minutes, but, and then tell you something. One very important thing, it doesn't happen in our village, but it probably should, the financial meetings with the operator about the draft budgets. they're actually committee meetings by legislation, and they should be properly minuted also. Doesn't have to say much in them, but they probably should be minuted. This leads us on to the next topic of minutes of the Residents Committee meetings. So we're talking about minutes only. The Retirement Village Act in relation to Residents Committee minutes of meetings.
Ray, Bevan has a question.
Bevan again. Unmute yourself.
You have to unmute.
You were saying
Bevan.
there about the draft budgets. I think our draft budgets are given to the whole residents meeting, not to the committee.
Aren't there discussions taking place under section 120, section under 129B? The Residents Committee may, by written notice given to the scheme operator, ask the scheme operator to attend a meeting of the Residents Committee about the budgets, section 129B. So if you're having a meeting about the budgets, they're really a committee meeting. And if they're a committee meeting, the section 129A requires that they're minuted.
Yeah, well, ours are minuted, but it's with everybody. The whole community is invited, and but it's not with the committee at all.
So the committee doesn't review the draft budget?
No, well, look, I don't think the committee does. The whole residents do. Everybody, the 300 people are invited to hear the draft budget.
No, but who reviews it? Who actually questions it? Who asks to see, which is what the committee can do? We want to see the invoices for that. We want to see that you've got 3 quotes. We want to see, you can't do that with 300 people. So the committee is given the authority to deep dive into the budget. That's why we talk about finance advisory panels. Somebody can actually go in and check that budget to the final details prior to the budget being released. And so once it goes to residents, you should be able to say, the committee has reviewed this, we agree with this, we don't agree with that, but you guys can vote. But the committee has a deep dive and can ask for proof of any additional expenditure if things have increased and so on. That's one of the main roles of the committee. We talk about what does the committee do. The committee is the authority, being given the authority to actually question the draft budget. That's why we talk about finance advisory panels.
Yeah, and the thing is that, well, ours is about getting on towards a year late.
No. You can ask for a draft budget, 28 days before the end of the financial year. And
yeah, we've been asking for 6 months or more.
Then they're in breach of the Act.
Yeah, but what do you do then?
You can report them. You can say, you're in breach of the Act. We're going to report you to the regulatory services. Because they're the body.
I think that's been done, but they don't take any notice.
Well, keep doing it because regulatory services will come out and check them. What village are you in, Bevan?
Well, I think we better not make that public. It's public to the ABC and everything.
It's not secret. It's not secret. If they haven't done something, it's not secret. The law requires them to do it. It's not like it's
not an undercover agency.
The ABC has had them on as not conforming to it, and that hasn't had any effect for 6 months. So I don't know.
Anyway, let's move on. We're not.
I will keep going. Give somebody a call.
We're off the topic again.
Mm-hmm.
So, as I was saying an hour ago, the Retirement Village Act prescribes strict requirements for minutes of committee meetings, and I'll read it out. Section 129A, minutes of meetings. The Residents Committee must, capital M-U-S-T, ensure full and accurate minutes are taken of each meeting of the Residents Committee. Full and accurate. For subsection 1, the committee must include at least the following particulars. At least. The date, time and place of the meeting, the names of persons present and details of the capacity in which they attended the meeting, issues discussed and how each issue was decided or dealt with, details of correspondence, reports, notices or other documents tabled. So as you can see, when it says full and accurate minutes of everything that went on at the meeting, everything's got to be recorded. Managers shouldn't say, don't put this in the minutes and all the rest of it. It should be recorded. And the whole idea of that section 129A, is transparency for residents to see what's going on. So anyone that thinks that the Residents Committee conducts secret business, they got the wrong idea. Anyone that writes to the committee and says to keep this confidential, they got to be advised before that letter's tabled to say it's going to be, if it's tabled or discussed, it's going to be recorded in the minutes and be available to residents. So really, there's nothing confidential at a Residents Committee meeting.
All correspondence must be made available to residents.
Yes,
all residents.
All correspondence is made available. So if someone wants to refer something that's confidential to the committee, and it's obviously to do with the management, they should be told that it's going to be tabled or directed straight to the manager themselves. That's the way it should be handled. The committee's got no real control about the confidentiality of it. The Act provides that residents may ask for copies of minutes, but it's far preferable for the draft minutes to be pushed out to residents and to the manager rather than them having to ask. I know in our village, they're emailed to residents who have email addresses, and those people that are interested, they get a hard copy in their letterbox if they're so interested. And there's also a permanent copy kept in our, I'll call it our multi-purpose room, where residents can go and look back at the minutes, and at the same time, a copy of the correspondence is kept with those minutes too in that multi-purpose room. So nothing's confidential. You can also stick them on a notice board somewhere, but they'll often go missing. Ours go into a folder, so they're pinned into a folder. They can't go missing as easily. The law requires that the committee must keep all the minutes of prior meetings. Basically, there's no limit on how long they should be kept for. It just says they've got to be kept. And from time to time, when there's no committee, those minutes have to be kept by the manager. On a slightly different topic to do with the minutes, but it's similar. The village should maintain a register of important decisions. They're not made at the committee meeting, but they're made at the residents' meetings. But this just leads on from minutes and stuff like that, that there should be a register. And nothing worse than 5 years down the track, residents are asking, what did we decide about such and such? You know, an ongoing question, for example,
locking of
voting entitlements. They changed the voting entitlements, and where did that ever happen? Or no, or all those sort of things. They should be kept somewhere in a special document with the minutes somewhere. Speaking of minutes, there is no requirement in the legislation for minutes of a residents meeting, the same as for a committee meeting. But I suggest that all those things should be done for a residents meeting anyway. Just be a good thing to do. Morty, you had a question?
No, I don't think so.
Did you have a question? No?
No.
So if there's any other questions, I'm talked out. I'm exhausted. I've had enough. I've had enough fun for one day.
Have we got another section, Ray, on actual? You finished what you're going?
Yeah, I was just going to say that our next webinar is Tuesday, the 13th of May. It's voting entitlements of residents and voting by residents. It's about voting, basically, by residents.
So can I just talk a little bit about finances?
If you want to.
Not rushing out the door.
When you say finances, you're going to talk about, there's nothing, we don't have anything about residents fund.
No. Just generally around finances.
Okay.
So you should be getting your budget soon. If you haven't got a draft budget, remember you can ask your operator for a draft budget. As I said, 28 days before the end of the financial year, and they need to give it to you. And then as residents, as a committee, you need to review that. But there were some financial changes that came through under the new financial regulations. So just a heads up that your budgets this year are going to look very different to the way budgets have looked in the past. There will be a lot more papers that come out with your budgets, because every line item on your budget must have an explanatory note as to how that was calculated, what it is, etc., etc. If there's, big changes, if you look at the last year and this year's figures, there's got to be a variation explanation on that. So you will see some things that are very different. As a residents committee, and not just as a committee, but any resident is entitled also to a copy of the quantity surveyor's report and the financial statements of the village. You can ask for those. So it's not just the end of the year figures that you get at the end of the year where they give you their budgets. That is totally illegal. You need to know what you are paying for. Okay, your weekly fees that you pay are purely the division between all the villages, all the units of the operating costs in simple terms, of the operating costs to run the village. So the day-to-day running of the village, those costs are put out in your budget. You review them, make sure you're happy with them. Say, okay, yeah, there are some rules around that, and I'm not going into those. So I'm giving you a very sort of broad overview of it, but you look at it, you say, okay, we're happy with it. There's nothing untoward. You don't have to have a special resolution vote. Okay, but if anything has had major increases in certain aspects of it, you have to have a special resolution vote. Then that amount that runs the village, the operator cannot make a profit out of your weekly fees. Those weekly fees then, the operating costs are divided by the number of units in the village, and that's what you pay. So if you don't look at the budgets, how do you know that the operator isn't loading your budget and you're paying for things that you shouldn't be paying, or they've loaded it and increased it? That's why you see the draft budget. That's why your role as a residents committee is to explore and deep dive into the budget. And what ARQ says is, if you haven't got the expertise on your residents committee, then go and set up a finance advisory panel, which has the treasurer of the residents committee, but some other residents who don't want to be on the committee, but have got particularly good skills in handling budgets. They've been project managers. They've been, they've had their own budget in their previous work role. They know how to read budgets. They know how to interpret financial papers. They become an advisory panel to the committee and deep dive into, and appointed by the committee. Therefore, they have the authority of the committee to ask questions of the management about how this budget is working. So don't just wait till the end of the year when you suddenly get the figures. At the end of the year, they have to give you the audited figures of the village. That's what you're getting in November, December. The budget's been passed and they run a budget meeting to give you the audited figures. That is not good enough. You've got to see the budget before the fees for your village are set. So that is probably, if you're looking at your role as a residents committee, forget Mrs. Brown's leaky tap. That's the thing you need to be looking at. You need to be taking responsibility for overseeing how the village budget is operating. So
Thanks, Judy.
that's a very important role.
Thank you, Judy. I think that's good explanation.
Okay, you're welcome, but you must do that, okay? That if you think that, you wonder what your role is, that's one of your most important roles as a committee, and Ray said we'll talk about village finance, residents' monies and how you handle residents' money, which is different again, but we're going to talk about that in the next webinar. But this is your role as a committee dealing with village budgets, and it's May. Okay, the budget should be out to you before the end of the financial year. You're going to have to start looking at those budgets, not waiting until you're just handed them. Ask your operator for a draft budget. If you have to, show them the part of the Act that says they have to give it to you, And probably, Ray, it's probably in the manual as well, isn't it?
We don't know. We just refer to our guide to village financials document.
Okay, see the village financial document on our website. Okay, that is about to be updated soon, or have the extra regulation attached to that. But there is on our website something called the village financial document. That will take you through the A to Z of what a village budget should do and what it should tell you and how you interpret it and what your role is interpreting it. So village financial document, it's about a 32-page document. You can download it from our website. Yep.
I think it's 59 pages now.
Oh, 59. Have you updated it?
It's not on the website yet. We were waiting for the guidelines from regulatory services to include references to them.
Okay.
So there's the old version's there. It's still not bad, but it doesn't include all the new stuff. But the new version will be out soon, any week now.
Okay.
So section 129B, Bevan, is the section that talks about the residents committee asking the scheme operator to come to residents committee meetings to discuss the budget.
Okay. So yeah, don't think you don't think you just passively, you have some control, well, not control over, but you have the ability to overview and oversee what's going on in your village in terms of the money.
Well, when we get last year's budget, we'll be able to compare this year's budget sometime in the next few years.
But
No, they should give it to you in the budget. You should see this year's figures against
how do they arrive at an amount to pay? How does anyone know what to pay?
If your fees, well, how do you know if your fees go up, is what Ray's saying.
Yeah, they got to work out a number. They got to work out whether it's $400 a fortnight or $500 a fortnight. How do they arrive at that without a budget?
Oh, they let us know by looking at our bank account.
Yeah, right.
Weird. Okay.
You go and have a look at the bank account. You can also ask for bank statements. Did you know that? You can ask for all the financial papers that deal with the financials of running your village. You all know, or you should know, about the 3 funds in a village. Read about them in the financial document if you don't know about them. But that is your role. That is your major role, to oversee the village budget. And then you should be having not once a month meetings, that's what Ray was talking about. When you're discussing and working with the village budget, you could be meeting with the village manager every day. Now, the problem for some villages is the village manager has no idea of the budget because the budget is prepared by head office. And if that is the case, then you should be meeting from people from head office, which is what happens here. I think they're actually frightened of our finance advisory panel, let me say, who points out the act to them all the time. And
well, we taught them. We taught them in our village, Judy. Yeah, we did. We taught them how to do it.
We taught them about what the committee rights were. So we've got a financial advisory panel because we've got, not enough expertise on the committee. So
Aileen has a question. Hi, we have a finance subcommittee.
Yep.
And we request from our project accountant.
Yep.
We meet with him every quarter to look at the financials for that quarter.
Yep.
So they can answer any questions that we don't understand what they've done. So that we keep on top of that each quarter.
Yep.
So when we and they always attend. Usually we have 2 people from head office come. So we're really fortunate that they're very open with what's happening. We don't have any problem at all, but because of that, we keep a good relationship with our main accountant for our whole operator. So when we come to the budget, then it's not scary.
No surprises because you've been tracking every quarter.
Exactly. Yeah.
And certainly that's a great example. Thank you for sharing that, Lenny. That's really another role of the committee or the finance committee. Look at the quarterly financials. You want to look at the bank accounts. You want to look at their the accounts, the expenditure, how are they tracking online with budgets? I mean,
it's important they put the expenditure against the right fund. They're always trying to squeeze stuff into the maintenance reserve fund rather than the capital replacement fund, because they contribute to the CRF where residents contribute to the MRF. So they're always trying to sneak stuff into there, so residents pay for it. So always check that closely. There's a whole range of stuff on our website, on Arqrv's website. There's a thing called the expenditure guidelines for Queensland villages. That tells residents and also helps managers allocate the expenditure to the right fund for different things. You don't realise some things are actually capital replacement. You wouldn't think so, but they actually considered capital replacement. For example, if you were to reline a swimming pool of the village, just to reline the swimming pool with tiles or something, you'd think that'd be maintenance, but it's not. It's actually capital replacement. And then the operator has to pay for it. So there's a whole range of things that are a bit unusual, and this document helps you get them into the right against the right fund.
So unless you're keeping an eye on that, then you don't know that the operator may be taking money from you that they're not entitled to.
And sometimes they don't do it on purpose. They're just ignorant of what's going on. Yeah.
Bevan, did you have a final question?
No, I don't know about the do it on purpose. So that's very generous. Anyway, we'll take notice of what you said and see what we can achieve.
Yeah, well, certainly read that paper, the financial document, village financial document.
On our website.
On the website. Certainly read that, because that will give you a really good understanding. And actually, Laurie, I was going to say that we really should be sending out that email on village regs, the new guidelines for the regulations that came out from the department. We could email that out to all the treasurers or secretary or whoever we've got as our contact for the residents committee, and send them that information out.
You know, they're not hosted on the website yet, Judy.
The trouble is, some of them, according to the survey by the ABC, some of the people, the government's written to the various owners, and they don't get a reply either for years. So there's some rogue's a bit strong operators.
Can I actually tell you some of the stories about the ABC? Please don't read them and listen to them and believe it, because I've been on the radio in response to some of those stories, and the ABC have not done their homework and they don't know the background. So these people being thrown out on the streets and the people being, overcharged. The problem is that residents don't read their contracts, and the resident has actually been in breach of the contract and then gone and complained to the ABC, and the ABC do not check that out. And in fact, the ABC has had to apologise to the property council for some of the things that they put, but they never obviously put that on the radio or so on. But they are not understanding residents contracts or the regulation, and you would notice that most of those issues raised for these poor old people that have been thrown in the streets have actually been by the families. The families have been the ones who have initiated this. So I will tell you that the families come to me absolutely furious when they find out they've got to pay an exit fee or they've got to pay other things. And they tell me, absolutely, my mum or my dad would never, ever have signed a contract like that. Well, would you please tell your children that you did sign it, and that they will stop, because ARQ will continue to work with your family after you've passed in trying to sort out the exit entitlements. But will you please tell your family or show your family the contract, and then they won't come to me angrily and tell me that Dad would never have signed it. because Dad did sign it. The ABC do not do their fact checking before they put out stuff about retirement villages.
Yeah. I wasn't talking about those aspects though. It's the regulations that aren't being upheld. But anyway, thank you very much for all that.
No, you're very welcome. Not a problem at all. And no final questions from anybody?
I was just going to suggest to Bevan, if he stays online, I'll get his email address and I'll send him the new version of that document that we haven't published yet.
Okay, but we'll send everybody the new regs and the new.
Yeah, send him the new regs, but I want to talk to Bevan just so
Okay.
he gets his email address and I'll send him the document. Okay.
Okay. All right, and then we'll send you the regs, and the regs are just going to be added to the document online in the next few weeks. But if we send you the regs and you read the online document, you're pretty right. You'll get a really good understanding, and I'm hoping that we will actually be able to run a webinar on the new regs and, you know, explaining in great detail what the new regs mean. But I'm hoping to get somebody from the department to do that. So once we've got that set up, we will certainly put that out and have somebody from the department actually explaining the regs in great detail and what your what the operators now have to do. I will say though that the operators have been told that they won't be penalised because there are penalties to operators for breaching the Act. But for the next 2 years, they won't be penalised if they don't quite get the transparency in the financial reporting, because for many of them, they've got some major work to do in how they reproduce the budgets and give them to us. So they've got 2 years grace to get it right, but it has to start this year. So I'm interested to see the budgets that come out this year. And as the department is, they've got 2 years to get it right. But some major changes in the way they give you the budget.
Thanks, that's good. We should have ours by 2030 then.
31.
You should. But Ray will tell you how to get it sooner. You really have to write to the department. All right, people, nobody else?
Bye-bye.
I'm sorry, we've got way over time. It's now 11:30. I've got to go and play lawn bowls. So all of you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for